Hey Reddit, I'm not the type to air my dirty laundry online, but I'm at my wit's end, and I don't even know who I can talk to in real life without losing it. So here I am, hoping maybe someone can help me sort through this mess. Let me tell you, it's a disaster. I feel like I'm stuck in some trashy soap opera, except it's my actual life falling apart. So here's the background. My name's Matt, 35M, and my wife, Jenna, 34F, and I have been married for 8 years. We met through some mutual friends back in college, and things just clicked. She was funny, smart, and caring, or at least that's what I thought. We dated for a few years, got married, and honestly, things seemed good. We had our share of ups and downs, but what couple doesn't, right? Nothing out of the ordinary. Jenna works as a nurse at a hospital, which means crazy hours. I've always been pretty understanding about that. I'm in IT and work from home, so we've got different schedules, but I always tried to make it work. In fact, I used to be proud of how flexible I could be, thinking that made me a good partner. If only I'd known what was really going on. About 6 months ago, things started changing. It wasn't anything huge at first, just small stuff. Jenna seemed distracted, more distant. She'd pull away from my hugs a little quicker than before, or come home from work late and barely say a word to me before heading off to bed. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, she's a nurse, long shifts, lots of stress, right? I told myself that if I gave her space, she'd snap out of it. We all go through rough patches, so I let it go. Then, I started noticing that she was on her phone all the time, but she'd act weird whenever I walked into the room. She'd lock her phone or quickly change the screen. I wasn't born yesterday. I know what that kind of behavior usually means, but I still convinced myself it was nothing. I didn't want to believe she'd betray me like that. I was blinded by years of trust and, honestly, love. Then the work trip started. I'm talking about these last-minute conferences that came out of nowhere. Suddenly, Jenna had to travel for these out-of-town medical seminars. At first, I didn't question it. She's always been ambitious about her career, so I figured it made sense that she'd want to learn new things. But she started going on these trips more and more often, sometimes twice a month. I asked her once if everything was okay between us, if she needed a break or something. She laughed it off, told me I was being needy, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. She said the trips were mandatory for her job, and I, like an idiot, believed her. But things kept getting weirder. She started dressing up for work in ways that didn't make sense. Jenna's always been the kind of woman who's comfortable in scrubs and a messy ponytail. But all of a sudden, she's putting on makeup, curling her hair, and wearing perfume. I'm talking the expensive kind I bought her for our anniversary, the kind she used to save for special occasions. But no, now it's her everyday work look. I remember asking her about it once, joking, "Who are you getting all dolled up for?" And she just rolled her eyes and said, "It's for me. I want to feel good at work." Something was gnawing at me by then, but again, I brushed it off. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband who starts snooping around. We had trust, or at least I thought we did. So I let it go. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The tipping point came a week ago. She told me she was going on another business trip. This time, she was heading out of state for a few days for a supposed medical conference. She seemed overly eager to get out the door, more so than usual. My gut was screaming at me that something was wrong. I had this sinking feeling, like I was on the verge of finding out something terrible. The day she was packing for the trip, I came home early. She didn't hear me come in because she had the music blasting in our bedroom while she packed. I walked in and just froze. There she was, standing over her open suitcase, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She was packing a nurse costume. Not her scrubs, mind you, but some kind of slutty Halloween version, and a nun costume. But that's not even the worst part. Sitting right next to those ridiculous costumes was a 12-pack of rubbers. I mean, really? A 12-pack? For a business trip? I felt my stomach drop. My whole body went numb, like I'd just been sucker punched. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at her suitcase like a fool. I wanted to scream at her, ask her what the hell was going on, but instead, I turned around and walked out without her seeing me. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe I just needed a moment to gather my thoughts. But I didn't confront her right away. I spent that night in a daze. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. All I could think about were those costumes, those rubbers, and what she was really doing on those work trips. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with someone else, and it made my blood boil. But I wasn't ready to blow up just yet. I wanted to be smart about this, and if I was going to confront her, I needed more than just my gut feelings. Then, out of pure spite, I did something petty. I went into her suitcase, found that 12-pack of rubbers, and I grabbed a sewing needle from the drawer. I poked a few holes in each one, feeling this strange sense of satisfaction. It was the only thing I could do in that moment that made me feel like I had a bit of control. If she was going to screw around, there were going to be consequences, whether she knew it or not. But that's not even the craziest part. The next day, after she left for her so-called business trip, I started digging around a bit more. And that's when I found the real bombshell. Her lover's phone number. What I did next might have been the most satisfying moment of my life. But it also changed everything. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even worse from here. I've always prided myself on being a trusting person. Maybe too trusting in hindsight. But when you've been with someone for over a decade, like I had with Jenna, you don't question things easily. You don't expect your partner, the person who promised to stand by you for life, to be capable of such betrayal. So when I saw those costumes, the nurse and the nun costumes, and that 12-pack of condoms stuffed into her suitcase, my whole world came crashing down in an instant. The next day after she left for her business trip, I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't focus, couldn't sit still. My mind was spinning with 1,000 scenarios of what she could be doing, and with whom. Was she really working? Who was Ryan, really? And how long had this been going on behind my back? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. All those late-night shifts, the sudden work trips, the dressing up, none of it was for her job. I was living with a stranger, and I had been blind to it for too long. I needed proof. I couldn't confront her without something solid, something undeniable. But I didn't know where to start. Her phone was always locked, and she guarded it like it held state secrets. She even took it to the bathroom with her, which should have been a red flag, but I ignored it at the time, convincing myself that everyone was just protective of their phones these days. But I had a backup plan, her iPad. Jenna had gotten an iPad a couple of years ago, but had mostly stopped using it, leaving it forgotten in a drawer in the living room. I remembered seeing her use it to check emails and messages a long time ago, so I figured it might still be synced with her accounts. I found it buried under some books and magazines, wiped the dust off, and powered it up. My heart was racing as the screen flickered to life. No password. My stomach twisted with a mixture of relief and dread as I unlocked it. I went straight to her messages, and there it was, her iMessage account still synced up. I scrolled through a few mundane texts from her coworkers and friends, but then I saw his name, Ryan. My pulse quickened as I opened the thread. What I saw made me want to throw the iPad across the room. The messages started innocuously enough, like they were just colleagues. Small talk about work, her schedule, things like that. But the deeper I scrolled, the filthier the conversation became. It wasn't just flirtatious, it was explicit. She was telling him how much she missed him, how much she couldn't wait to see him on this business trip. She described what she was going to wear for him, which, as I now realized, included those costumes she had packed. And then they started talking about leaving their spouses. I felt my blood boil. The two of them weren't just fooling around. They were planning a future together. A future where they'd leave me and Ryan's wife behind like discarded trash. Jenna had even joked about how easy it would be because I never asked questions. How she'd just tell me she had another work trip, and I'd buy it. And I had bought it. For months. The rage built up inside me like a pressure cooker. But beneath it, there was something else, pain. I had never felt a betrayal this deep, this raw. This wasn't just a random fling or a drunken mistake. This was calculated, premeditated. She had made a fool out of me, and I let her do it. But I wasn't done yet. In one of the messages, Ryan mentioned his phone number. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my own phone and dialed him. The line rang twice before he picked up. "Hello?" he said, his voice casual, like he wasn't about to have his entire world blown apart. "Hey Ryan," I said, my voice icy. "Just wanted to say congratulations. You're going to be a daddy. Tell Jenna she's homeless now." There was silence on the other end. I could practically hear him choking on whatever smug response he had prepared. I hung up before he could say anything else. I didn't need to hear his pathetic excuses or explanations. I was done with both of them. But my plan wasn't finished yet. After hanging up on Ryan, I sat there for a few minutes, letting the rush of anger subside. It didn't take long for the realization to hit me that I needed to do something more. Confronting Jenna and Ryan with the truth over the phone wasn't enough. They both deserved to feel the same level of humiliation they'd put me through, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. I still had Jenna's things packed up from her last-minute departure. All her clothes, her toiletries, her makeup bag, and of course those stupid costumes. I stuffed everything into a few garbage bags, threw them in the back of my car, and headed to Ryan's house. Thanks to the messages, I knew exactly where he lived. I had debated doing this for hours, but after that phone call, there was no turning back. If Jenna wanted to play house with Ryan, she could go ahead and live with him. I was done being the fool. I pulled up to his house around 7 p.m. It was a nice suburban neighborhood, quiet and unsuspecting. You wouldn't guess that behind those perfectly manicured lawns, two people were wrecking lives. I parked a little ways down the street and walked up to his front door with the garbage bags full of Jenna's stuff. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't nervous anymore. I was pissed. I knocked on the door. After a few seconds, a woman answered. I recognized her from a couple of pictures on Ryan's social media. This was his wife, Kelly. She looked at me, confused at first, like she was trying to place who I was. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but wary. I took a deep breath and then said the words that would change both our lives. "You might want to sit down for this." I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Matt. I'm Jenna's husband. Your husband Ryan has been having an affair with her." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she was going to pass out. She stared at me like she hadn't heard me correctly, but then I saw it, the realization sinking in. She knew, or maybe she'd suspected it for a while, but now, hearing it from a stranger, she couldn't ignore it anymore. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, stepping back from the door. "That's not possible. Ryan wouldn't." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I felt terrible for her in that moment because I knew exactly how much it hurt to hear those words. "I have proof. Texts, messages, everything. I'll show you if you want." She stood there, frozen, for what felt like forever. And then, finally, she stepped aside, letting me into the house. Inside, the house was picture perfect. Photos of their kids on the walls, family vacations, smiles that now felt like a lie. I followed Kelly to the kitchen, where she sat down at the table, her hands trembling. I could tell she was trying to hold it together, but she was on the verge of breaking. I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages between Jenna and Ryan. She read through them in silence, her face going through every possible emotion. Shock, disbelief, anger, sadness. By the time she reached the end, she was crying. Silent, heart-wrenching tears. "I'm so sorry," I said again. "I didn't want to hurt you, but you needed to know." She nodded, wiping her eyes, but didn't say anything for a long time. Then, out of nowhere, she stood up, grabbed her own phone, and dialed Ryan's number. He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. He was probably with Jenna, enjoying his little getaway, thinking he'd gotten away with everything. Kelly let out a bitter laugh. "I've known something was wrong for a while," she said, her voice shaky. "I just didn't want to admit it. He's been distant, always working late, making excuses. I should have seen it coming. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? We were both in the same sinking boat." But then Kelly looked at me, and there was a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. a spark of determination. "I want to end this," she said, her voice now firm. "But I'm not going to let them get away with it. Not without feeling the consequences." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. I wasn't just here to drop Jenna's stuff off. This wasn't about packing up her life and moving on. This was about making sure they both felt the weight of their betrayal. Kelly and I weren't just victims anymore. We were partners in revenge. Kelly and I spent the next few hours devising a plan. She wasn't the type to lash out in a fit of rage, and neither was I. But we both wanted something more satisfying than just confronting them. They had been sneaky, calculated, and we were going to give them a taste of their own medicine. The first part of the plan was simple. I was going to send Jenna a message, acting as if nothing had changed, pretending I was still clueless about her affair. Meanwhile, Kelly would wait for Ryan to return home, keeping things normal on her end until the right moment. We needed to gather a little more evidence, something that would ensure they couldn't talk their way out of this when we finally confronted them together. We started small. While I messaged Jenna, telling her I couldn't wait to see her when she got back, Kelly began checking Ryan's accounts, looking for any financial discrepancies or suspicious patterns. Sure enough, there it was. Charges for hotels, dinners at fancy restaurants in cities where Jenna had business trips. We were building our case piece by piece. The more we dug, the more it became clear that this wasn't just a fling. Ryan and Jenna were practically living a double life. They had whole weekends planned out, staying at resorts, even renting a vacation home together once. Every new piece of evidence we found felt like a punch to the gut, but at the same time, it fueled our resolve. We were going to make sure their lives unraveled just as spectacularly as they had ruined ours. As Kelly and I uncovered more of their secret life, the anger simmering inside both of us reached a boiling point. But we weren't about to let that anger get in the way of what had to be done. If Jenna and Ryan wanted to play dirty, we were going to take it up a notch. But this time, we'd be the ones pulling the strings. I spent the next couple of days pretending like everything was normal on my end. Jenna, blissfully unaware, continued texting me from her business trip with Ryan. It was almost laughable how easily she slipped back into her role as the loving wife. She sent me pictures of the hotel lobby and the fancy dinners they were having, under the guise of her work event, of course. And I played my part, responding with casual comments like, "Sounds fun," and "Can't wait to see you when you get home." But inside, I was seething. Every time I saw her messages pop up on my screen, it was like another knife twisting in my gut. But I swallowed it down because I knew the endgame was near. Meanwhile, Kelly was gathering her own ammunition. She found more credit card statements, confirming that Ryan had been spending money on Jenna for months. Expensive jewelry, weekend getaways, even a luxury spa trip. He was throwing their money at Jenna like she was some kind of prize he'd won. Kelly kept her distance from Ryan for the time being, knowing she had to keep up the facade just a little longer. We were both playing the waiting game, biding our time for the perfect moment to strike. And then the moment came. Jenna was due back on Sunday evening, as planned. She had no idea what was waiting for her when she got home. I had spent the day preparing. I didn't want a confrontation in our house, no. This needed to happen somewhere public, somewhere she wouldn't be able to squirm her way out of it. So I told her that I wanted to go out for dinner when she got back, just the two of us. It wasn't unusual for us to grab dinner together after she came home from a trip, so she agreed without hesitation. I could practically see her smiling through the text. "That sounds perfect, babe. Can't wait." She thought she had won. She thought she had me fooled. But the truth was, she had no idea what was about to come crashing down on her. Kelly and I had already agreed on where and when it would all go down. She had convinced Ryan to meet her at the same restaurant, under the guise of a romantic dinner. It wasn't hard. Ryan, ever the oblivious cheater, believed Kelly was still clueless. He thought he was in control of everything. He had no idea that Kelly and I had orchestrated every last detail of what was about to unfold. Sunday evening came, and Jenna arrived home, acting like everything was perfect. She kissed me on the cheek, told me how much she missed me, and I played along. It was surreal, standing there in our kitchen, knowing that within an hour, everything was going to explode. But I kept my cool. "Ready for dinner?" I asked, grabbing my car keys. She smiled, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. "Yeah, let's go. I'm starving." We drove to the restaurant, a nice little Italian place we used to frequent back when things were still good between us. Jenna was chatting about her trip, throwing in little lies about meetings and workshops she supposedly attended. Every word out of her mouth was like a slap in the face, but I just nodded and kept up the act. When we walked into the restaurant, my heart was pounding. Kelly and Ryan were already there, sitting at a table near the back. Kelly saw us walk in and gave me a small, knowing nod. It was time. I led Jenna to our table, just a few feet away from theirs. She hadn't noticed them yet. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, probably texting Ryan, unaware that he was sitting right behind her. I could feel the tension rising, but I waited. Timing was everything. About 15 minutes into dinner, when Jenna excused herself to use the restroom, I made my move. I walked over to Kelly and Ryan's table. Ryan's face went pale the moment he saw me approach. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost, which in a way he had. Kelly, on the other hand, was calm, cool, collected, like she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Evening, Ryan," I said, my voice cold but steady. He stammered, "Matt, what are you?" "Oh, don't worry," I interrupted, smiling slightly. "I'm just here to have a nice dinner with my wife. You know, your mistress, the one you've been screwing behind my back." His eyes widened, and he glanced at Kelly, who was sitting there, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold like it was a show she'd seen 100 times. "Kelly, what is he talking about?" Ryan asked, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. But Kelly wasn't having it. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she turned to me and said, "Matt, let's show him what we found, shall we?" I pulled out my phone and showed Ryan the messages. All the texts between him and Jenna, the hotel bills, the dinner receipts, everything. He sat there, his face growing redder by the second, his hands shaking. "You've been caught, Ryan," Kelly said, her voice calm but deadly. "There's no getting out of this." Just then, Jenna returned from the restroom. She froze the moment she saw us all sitting there together. Ryan, Kelly, and me. Her eyes darted between us, and I could see the panic setting in. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what was happening. What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. I stood up, turning to face her. "What's going on, Jenna? You've been lying to me for months. I know everything. About Ryan, about the trips, about your pathetic little affair. And now we're done." Jenna's face went white, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, she looked genuinely terrified. "Matt, don't even try." I cut her off. "I've heard enough of your lies. I packed your things. They're at Ryan's place. I'm done with you." She looked at Ryan, who was sitting there in stunned silence, like a deer caught in the headlights. Kelly just watched them both, a small smirk playing on her lips, enjoying every second of their downfall. "You're homeless now, Jenna," I said, my voice low. "And Ryan, you're going to be a daddy soon. Hope you two enjoy your new life together." Jenna opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She looked at Ryan, then back at me, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. But it was happening. She was cornered, and there was no way out. As I turned to leave, I glanced at Kelly, who gave me a satisfied nod. We'd done it. We'd exposed them both for the cheaters they were, and now they had to live with the consequences. I walked out of the restaurant, not bothering to look back. Behind me, I could hear Jenna and Ryan arguing, their voices getting louder, but it didn't matter anymore. I was free.